So, hello, welcome. My name is Lord Hard Thrasher, and slightly unusually, as you can see, I'm actually on the screen, which means you're going to get the joy of my flappy hands, which I can't help. And I'm joined here today to do an interview, which we've not done before on this channel, by Mark Cann, who's director of the Burma Star Memorial Fund, which I had to get right in my head because you changed names. Before we go too much further, Mark, can you just explain who you are and what you do?
Hello. I'm Mark Cann, and in this capacity today, I'm the director of the Burma Star Memorial Fund. As you say, I have rented a baronial home, so I fit into keeping with you, my lord. I'm all yours for the next half an hour.
Well, I'm joining you today live. I know I've dragged you out of bed quite early in the morning. Me too. I'm actually in a hotel in the middle of London, and they've got this rather lovely room, which makes me feel at home. So I'm not quite in the baronial manner today, or indeed in the wine cellar, thank God. But the Burma Star is an interesting thing, both as a medal and then as the association of what's become the Memorial Fund. But could you just explain what the Burma Star actually was in the first place?
Yeah, so the medal recipients went to those who served in Burma between the end of 41 to I think June 45, and they didn't have to be there for a particularly long period. I'm not entirely sure. You can look it up on our website, but it's very prescriptive. And those people got awarded the Burma Star. There was the Pacific Star as well, which some of the naval guys got. And for the purposes of the Burma Star Association that was formed in the early 50s, 51, if you had that medal and indeed the Pacific Star and had sort of been involved in Burma campaigns from the naval side, then you were a welcome member of the Burma Star Association, which then in the 90s very gradually morphed into the early 2000s into the Burma Star Memorial Fund, which sort of properly came into being and took over in its entirety from the Burma Star Association in around 2009, and has been going
presumably as the veterans began to die off, and you moved to the kind of the next phase of what's needed to happen in terms of the memory of the campaign.
Yeah, it was exactly that. I mean, they're very the veterans of Burma were, I think, like a lot, were very keen on looking after their own, and they thought that could best be done by their own. I think it's a sort of hangover from the Forgotten Army psyche. So they were running out of puff and people to run their association branches. And the trustees of the Burma Star Association, the powers that be, decided that they needed to look for the future and a legacy program. And so what money there was moved across, and the Burma Star Memorial Fund took on the responsibility of the veterans still requiring benevolence. So that's what we do. You'll hear me bang on about this, but in short, benevolence for the veterans that are still alive. Remembrance is the more traditional ceremonies, stained glass windows, gardens. We look after that to keep that going, and the obviously the cenotaph. Well, it sounds like it must be more upmarket than a Premier interview. So anyway, right. So I think I finished, haven't I? Oh yes, and another thing. So and then the final thing is the legacy, which is, how do we make sure that when there is no one who can directly recollect the events of Burma, and all that memory fades, how we keep it alive, and what are we trying to keep alive?
So I know you're digitizing the records at the moment around the membership and when they came in, and I was having a little browse through and looking at what you've got on there so far, and I was fascinated to see that there were people that joined quite early, so in the 50s, and then it sort of seemed to peter out a bit, and then there seems to be a rise up again in the end of the 60s, early 70s, and then again in the sort of, I guess, the 90s, as people went through different phases. And it occurred to me that some of that was about trying to talk about what had happened with other people. And I think that the association itself probably became a bit of a talking shop where people with similar backgrounds could talk. And it's almost as if different points in their lives they were getting ready to talk about it, and at different phases when perhaps they hadn't. Particularly I was interested to see that spike at the end of the 90s, because it looks to me like, just from a cursory glance, it looked to me like there were a group of chaps getting to the end of their life and suddenly wanted to talk about things they perhaps hadn't talked about before. Is that fair? Or?
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair and spot on, to be honest. The only other factor would be families pushing and asking more, and of course, when they in the 50s they were still young. This is the big thing, I'll say this later. It was young people marching towards danger and getting killed on our behalf, and everyone forgets that the image of a veteran is very much an old person, and we forget about what it was, who they were, and what they gave up. So the families become older, more mature, and start asking the questions. So that would be about the sort of 60s, 70s, when you got your children you would have had in the sort of late 40s, early 50s, becoming 18, 20, whatever, having children of their own. So I think the families impact and finding out. But to digress a moment, it's a individual thesis I came up. I should have said at the beginning, I took over I've only been involved in Burma Star Memorial Fund for just over a couple of years, and they got into trouble during COVID. It was pretty brutal to them and everything else. So I've sort of come in to help sort it out. So I've done a lot of work, and I've done a lot of sort of blue sky, blank piece of paper thinking and everything else, and asked some difficult questions. The idea is why they didn't talk about it very much. I think just about everybody who ever rings me up, everyone who ever says Burma, the next thing is it's a bit like Nicholas Soames. Never mentions who his grandfather was, but hello, I'm Nicholas Soames. Did you know my grandfather's Churchill? So within 2 minutes they will say, "Oh, I had X relative in Burma." Never talked about it. Never say that. The first thing is they did talk about it, and you're right, they talked about it to each other. And but they did talk about it to people who it was relatable to. So that was why the associations, the clubs were very important, and sticking with each other. So it was very relatable. Some of them didn't talk about it because it was so brutal they didn't want to remember it. A lot didn't talk about it because they had an imposter syndrome, guilt complex, because they didn't see, and one of the reasons they survived is they didn't see some of the horrific action that so many others did who didn't survive, and therefore they didn't really feel they were worthy to talk about it. And some, I'm sorry to say, but I think in many ways it's a form of flattery. Burma and a Burma medal was ripe for the sort of Walter Mitties who, because it was such a confusing campaign, you could say you were buy a medal and say you were in Burma. So some of them weren't there at all, especially later on. But they might have been veterans and they wanted to help or get involved in the local branch or whatever. So I mean, there are many different reasons, all actually socially quite interesting.
I think you made a point a minute ago about young people being involved in this. I mean, the age of these kids, and they were kids, is astounding. I'm in my mid-40s now, and I look at accounts of 19, 20-year-olds storming bunkers and charging around the place. And then you even look at the leadership. I mean, God, Slim himself was only 57 when he was leading the army, and you're kind of like, it's actually quite young, or it maybe I'm getting old and it feels like it's quite young, but they were not old men.
I mean, they were incredibly young, and an immense amount of responsibility and was put on their shoulders, which must have been incredibly a weighty burden. I mean, a real weighty burden. And I want to emphasize this point. There's a very good chap who runs a website called My Sleeve, and you can put the photograph of the person you're remembering on an armband and to remember. But I'm really championing that, because it does, if you get a photograph of when they were young and you look at those young faces, you then remember again. And dare I say it, with all the pessimism around, and we may be going to war again, let's not forget that it will be our young that will prosecute it. So,
which is a jolly good thing in my opinion, but I don't want to go fucking do it. That's my point.
Well, exactly. And also, I mean, my grandfather had a hell of a war, not in Burma, but he told me more as I was going through my army career, because he knew it was relatable. But some of the things he was telling me when I was sort of just gone through Sandhurst, about his training and my training, and and later on, he really went through it. And of course, I suppose the longest deployment I did was 6 months. I mean, he was gone for 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you
So,
served, if you were with the army wherever you were, I mean, Italy, even later in France, you were away for years at a time. And if you were in Burma, you were there for the duration.
yeah,
I mean, Slim famously talks about trying to, at the end of the war, when they were starting to try and rotate people out, and people with long service, and it was, I think it was 4 years, that it dropped to sort of 3 years and 11 months, and it became 3 years and 6 months. And the impact of that, actually, because so many of those troops hadn't been home for all that time. And he went, well, I haven't been home for 7 years. So,
yeah,
that's how it is. And you just couldn't get away with that today. Well, you
no,
wouldn't if you were serving in the army currently. So I guess I should probably rewind very slightly, Mark, because we talked a bit about you being the director of Burma Star, but you were in the army for 11 years, weren't you? Is that right?
yeah, yes. I was I was a trooper for 3 months of the course they used to do back in the day for officers that were spotty and immature. Up at Catterick, so you used to do basic training as a trooper. Then I went off to university, and then I came back to Santos, and went and then did 11 years with the 1721st Lancers, who amalgamated into being Queen's Royal Lancers. And
Right.
just an aside, the tour I was most fulfilled in and probably enjoyed the most was in Belize. So I'm actually jungle trained. So I relate
There you
a
go.
little
See
bit.
that? So what did you? So when you left the army, what did you do after that? I mean, because lots of people come out and go, "Holy shit, what do I do now?" What did you do
Well, I
next?
thought, well, no, exactly. And so I thought I'd be clever and have that lined up. So I was going to go to staff college, and it was that last chance back. Then you either, if you did that, and I come from a long line of army people, so I knew that would be me for the duration, and I just sort of wanted to break the family mold, if you like, a little bit, and try something else. See if I could do something else. And also, I came from a long line of distinguished majors, and I was in danger of being promoted, so I didn't want to let the family side down. So so I left, and I thought I'd be very clever, and lined up a job to be a banker with Citibank,
Right.
which about sort of 2 weeks after I left, and 2 months before I was about to get married, fell through because of a merger, and they put on hold all their recruiting. So I was in trouble. So a friend of mine gave me a job with his manufacturing company in Birmingham. And then I very quickly, because I had a sort of event legacy, and I'd done quite a few events whilst in the army, strange enough to do with polo and skiing, but I had to organize. Anyway, I sort of fell into the British Forces Foundation, which does entertainment shows. And I didn't really want to do it, but it was something, and it wasn't in Birmingham. So respects to the Slim.
Having to work in Birmingham on a regular basis, I couldn't agree more. Get out as fast as you can.
Yeah, well, especially 30 years ago, whenever it was, 20 years ago. But so anyway, so I got into that, and British Forces Foundation does frontline morale for the armed forces. So ever since leaving, I've actually been to every war zone or an operation that the military had been engaged in, putting on shows. So I took Ed Sheeran to Cyprus a couple of months ago and things like that. So that's what that does. And as time went on, it was always a sort of get the job done thing. I've just sort of grown a bit of a portfolio, and we brought other charities in. So, I've got involved and worked with other charities and do other events and get involved in the odd documentary and things like that. So it's a very interesting and sort of fulfilling life. And the thing I've really enjoyed recently has been the Burma Star.
So you did that, you started that a couple of years ago, you said?
Yeah. Well, I came in, they advertised for a chief executive. I applied at the 11th hour, literally, because I just saw it, because I sort of read and I thought, I think I could help them here. I know exactly what's going on. They said, Mark Cann said, okay, well, we'd like to take you on. It was only, they've gotten over sort of a couple of days a week or month, whatever. And I said, that's great, fine. And then I said, the only thing is, we're not going to do it like you think. And he went, oh, aren't we? No, I think we're going to do it. I think you need to do this a wholly different way. So we sort of rationalized the cost. We cut the overheads and the cost by 2/3. Sort of got together, focused on what's really good and what's really important, and have gone from there. And now we've got the mobile museum and this legacy program and everything else. So I think it was so easy and quick, and how appropriate it was Burma about the 49 to turn around, and even the internal papers, I sort of, wrote, paragraph headings such as "defeat into victory," phase 3 or whatever, crossing the next river to cross is, all these sort of metaphors. But anyway, it's just been pushing it open doors, and I really am. I'm very proud of what we've achieved in a very short space of time, and I think we're now ready to, on the cusp of VJ Day 80th anniversary, we're ready to really ask some big questions of people and to see what they would see remembrance and legacy of Burma being without veterans.
I mean, I think that is the tricky bit, because it is now about the bit without veterans. And you mentioned VJ Day there a minute ago, and yeah, it's 80 years next year, which is kind of hard to believe, because it makes me feel very old, because I remember when it was 40 years just.
Yeah.
And I think that whole question about now the veterans are beginning to disappear. I mean, they will be gone very soon. How do we memorialize what happened then? The dates. I mean, VJ Day is always something which strikes me as a bit strange, because it was actually the end of the war, whereas VE Day tends to get the promotion. It almost feels like when you stop going, it's not so much about when the document was signed, but when the fighting stopped, is sort of my
totally.
view.
And it makes no sense. I don't know why it's not being raised, but let's raise it here. My lord, we'll take it into the house tomorrow. But I mean, why the heck isn't there an end of Second World War Day? I mean, you've got remembrance sort of exhaustion anyway, and and you can't overly ask the public to stand for minute silences. You know what I mean? You've got to measure these things, and it is that, and then combine the two, VE and VJ. I don't think anyone would object to that. They'd object to it being in August because everyone's on holiday, but I just definitely, it just needs to be.
That's okay. I mean, there needs to be a day. I mean, it's always fascinating me, if you go and look at the old memorials that were put up in the immediate aftermath of the First World War, the date isn't 1914-18, it's 1914-19, because as far as they were concerned, it was when Versailles was actually signed that they dated it from. And then over time, it's reversed back to the 11th of November, which, okay, makes some sense. But it isn't like these things are locked in stone, particularly as... if you look at the end of the Second World War, it's bloody messy. It's, there's the whole thing. This drives me potty. So sorry, I'm going to go off on a rant now. So when you looked at the point at which the Japanese were prepared to surrender versus when they were actually allowed to surrender, that was McCarthy going, I need a ceremonial process to happen in Japan on board my battleship. And therefore, all the other fronts, wherever they were, whether it was the Philippines or on any of the islands or down in Malaya and Singapore, which of course were just about to be invaded by the British, everybody had to stop. And there's still boys getting killed. Because they wouldn't sign the piece of paper so that McCarthy could have his moment of willy waving on the deck of his bloody great big battleship. And it just drives me potty. But it's an example of, we're memorializing the end of that period based on when McCarthy signed a piece of paper, not actually when the fighting should have stopped. So let's be a bit more sensible about it.
Well, absolutely. And those sort of very worthy day-long news programs, everything else by journalists who, despite the notice, are not that well read into the subject.
It's crept up on them. It's only been 80 years. Give them a chance.
Yeah, and they ask these banal questions. But the consequence of that for me, and why I worry about it, is that VE and VJ are not in. They don't want to be found in a competition they haven't entered, but the press will put them in one, and and VJ will get lost in the noise of VE for practical reasons. One, everyone will be exhausted after VE and think they've done it. I thought we'd done the end of the war, 80th anniversary, and two, it's in August, VJ, and everyone wants to be on holiday. So it makes no sense going forward. The important thing is that all the aspects. And there are what I call the rock star campaigns: Dunkirk, Normandy, Alamein, and Burma, I'd say, which everyone's fascinated in. But, okay, celebrate those, but don't forget all the other bits.
I mean, look, history's a big and complicated thing, and it's often hard to get your head around. And people want simple pre-wrapped solutions, and I get it. Right? I mean, why the hell, unless you're interested in it, do you need to know the particular details? But it does sometimes drive me a bit potty. You reference some things like Dunkirk and so on there. And I think if you look to Burma itself, you have the Battle of Kohima and Imphal, which for us as Brits is the thing that we always talk about. But actually, the most incredible battles are the ones that no one remembers. Like, for example, the fall of Tunisia. More German troops got captured there than at Stalingrad, and we don't talk about it. The drive to Myitkyina by 14th Army is the most amazing campaign. It's executed on a shoestring. It works perfectly, and as a result, no one really knows about it. It's only when we nearly fuck it up people get interested.
Absolutely, and I suppose the strategic importance at the time. But yeah, I think that's right. It's it's the success, and actually, you know, you're going right back in time. You know, your generals were great celebrities and characters of the day, and the ones that were the biggest and the best were the ones who managed to maximize the social media of the day for the cult of their leadership, and talked about. I mean, Nelson was just, you know, revered, but you know, he was not shy in putting his case forward about how marvelous.
He was not backward in coming forward, was he? No.
No. And Wellington, in a totally different sort of way, was, you know, entitled. But yeah, all these characters. Slim being a slight exception, which probably contributes a little bit more to the Forgotten Army being forgotten, because when he got back, he didn't, you know, quite champion himself quite so much. He was very good at looking after his own, but also he went to Australia, which didn't help. And actually, in the remembrance piece as well, I mean, the thing I draw on, and I spoke about this at the remembrance service, is that when you were, you know, and I was a soldier as well, when you were fighting, when you go to war, I mean, look, when you join up, I mean, I always say, you know, I keep telling the senior officers of the army that their advertising campaigns are rubbish. There's only one way to get a young person to join up, is have an advert which says "get paid, get laid," you know, and that's it. You know, and so you know, you join up, you get money in your pocket, you have a nice uniform, your chances go up, and you travel the world, and everyone thinks you're sexy because you get given a gun. Okay, great. Then you get told, oh, there's a bit of trouble somewhere, and you take a little bit more interest than you would normally, and then you think, oh shit, we're going. It's not really crossed your mind. And, I mean, you know, bayoneting the sandbag at Santas and everything, it was just the most hilarious day of training. But, you know, a friend of mine told me when he was in Afghanistan in the Green Zone, he suddenly heard the cry, fix bayonet. You know, so it becomes very, very real. Yeah, it becomes very real. And so I've always asked myself, are you there for sort of lofty things such king and country, all this sort of stuff? And you're there because you like a mug, you thought you were going to get lucky and you needed some money. You're standing with the people you like, who are your friends, and there's all that stuff. But actually, what's the higher ordeal? And Slim tapped into this. It's as I say, it's the values that we hold dear as a nation. Well, what are they? Well, democracy. If you buy a house, it will be yours forever. The law will hold up. If somebody steals something from you, whether the police catch them or not, it is accepted that they are wrong, and that shouldn't happen. You know, there is the rule of law. We are a functioning democracy, imperfect that it is. The monarchy is something to espouse. It's greater than, you know, the sum of our parts and everything else. All this sort of stuff are the things which sort of fundamentally make you go over the top and just get it done. And it's a very interesting thesis. Is, you know, why did people do it? And my God, you know, when they gave their todays for us, for the today we're living now, I mean, that was a hell of a thing.
It was,
and they did it. They did it for this, didn't they? They did it for this, so that we could talk about it, we could complain about it, we could whatever. They did it so that we could be masters of our destiny in a sort of consultative, compromising method, but without actually, you know, shooting each other every time we wanted to change our minds.
One of the joys I think about living in the UK is it buggers things up on a regular basis. We all know it buggers things up on a regular basis. Its mild level of incompetence is fine. I mean, it's not great. We'd like it to be better, but the compromise allows you to have a stable life, which should hopefully give you the opportunity to not have to panic about somebody coming down and burn your house down, or raid your local village, or any of that stuff, which actually, if you take that back into the context of the empire, particularly at the end of the war and into independence, you know, the violence which got unleashed because of sectarian division and because law broke down, because of us, however you want to look at it, that is a thing that that they fought to protect, to allow us. And I love that phrase, for the freedom of our children, because I think it's absolutely true. It wasn't necessarily about them there at that moment in time. It was about what happens next. And then you wind up on the soldiers level, actually in contact with the enemy. Why are you fighting? Well, you're fighting because you don't want to get them to get hurt or let them down. And that's typically why, the Americans talk about the guy in the foxhole next to them. And it's true, right? It's all about the unity.
Well, also every young person thinks they're invincible. They don't think it'll happen to them, which is something we tap in. I mean, but look at all these, all the countries. It's freedom. It's your right, and in this country they pretty much, for good or bad, hold up. Lord Wetherall, who was a good, I liked actually the connection with the Indian Army there, because he ran that. He was Indian Army and he was the speaker. He told me once, he just said, don't confuse us with Germany. Everyone thinks we're very organized and everything should work. He said, we don't. He said, the British people are actually hopeless at organizing things. What we're very good at is organizing chaos. And I thought that was a very, very astute observation. He said, that's why we were so effective in empire, because we could organize chaos, and we're very happy with it.
So can I change tack just for a moment? Because we talked a minute ago about the records that you got, and then you also mentioned there were a few sort of Walter Mitty type characters out in as part of the Star Association. I know a lot of people that are watching this are thinking about researching family members and so forth. You guys just hold the Burma Star Association records, don't you? You don't hold any other military records. Well,
and don't want to mislead people. Really, all we have is the record of if they became a member, the piece of paper they filled in as a member. And I have to say, the search engine, our archives are amazing on the website, but you just have to be patient with the words you put in. If you get too many responses, so be as specific as you possibly can. Just keep playing around with it, because you will find what you're looking for. So we have the record, which can be helpful to somebody. It might have an army number, it might have the medals they've got, it might have an address, it might have rank, or just, it depends what they're. But there's not a lot there. We have all the decos on there, so you might get a search out. Somebody mentioned in one of those, the Deco was the magazine in the theatre, the sort of in theatre, entertainment magazine, news sheet. And then they went on post, the association had kept Deco going for years and years and years. So, and a lot of veterans wrote their stories in there. So it's quite a good, first-hand account. So there's not, and we've got a timeline. There's other stuff, and we put people's stories up there. Tom Donovan is someone who's written he's an expert on Briggs, General Briggs, who he and Messervy were very close. Again, hell of a character. So I mean, so there are other bits and pieces that we put up there, and we would like to expand that. Or certainly, we are becoming a sort of a focus point for people to give us their diaries, and so we've got a lot of sort of rather extraordinary stuff that is just too precious to throw away, because it's this personal recollection. In terms of going through it, that is going to take a lot of resources. But we put up what we can, and anything that we think is worthwhile, we will digitize, or anything that is already digitized, we will digitize, and everything else. So the records. But if people want to find out the record of a relative, if they go on our website, they'll find it. There's a way of doing it by going to the government, and you can request the relative's war record, and sort of start the journey from there.
I'm doing it with my granddad at the minute, because although I know some stuff, I don't know a great deal. So I had to start with getting a certified death certificate, send it into the MOD, which they accepted. They said that we're going to go find the records, and then I did that. I'm told it can take up to a couple of years if it's complicated, and his definitely is. So we will see what comes out of it.
It can. It's interesting. And the most exciting thing of all is you get a page which has just got the name, and then it's all redacted, even all this time later. And then you were related to someone who's utterly disgraceful or utterly brilliant and incredibly brave. You just don't know. But it starts the journey.
I applied for my great uncles just because he died if they died during the war, it's actually easier. It's much faster. So I did that. So he was killed in Italy, and so
Much more
sent me his
convenient
service
for
record.
bureaucracy when they do die, you know. It's
Yeah, much easier for the bureaucracy. It saves a whole
Robert
bunch of
Stout, you know.
paper for us.
Okay,
But dead next.
yeah.
But so they sent me his records, and they redacted the stupidest things. So they redacted the name of his school.
Yeah.
Not sure why. But then, of course, he was part of the combined cadet force. So technically, his first position in the army was at his school. So it then says school name, cadet force at the top of his record. Like, well, you've redacted it there, but not the, what?
Yeah.
And then my favourite bit was that they'd taken out whether or not he'd accepted vaccinations. I was like, I don't think he cares. He's been dead for 80 years.
Yeah, that's genius. But Robert Kennedy was interested in all this. No, but I mean, yes, I mean, well, I love all that though. I quite like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bizarre. But if you are chasing down, it is quite a fun journey. But it does require immense patience, like you say. It can take a long time. But the key, I mean. I don't mean to be rude to people, and I want to encourage anyone to ring us up. But some people ring up and say, "Can you tell me about my grandfather?"
Sure.
And then the phone line goes dead, and I go, I don't sort of any clues. Well, he never talked about it. Talked about what? And they go, Burma. Oh, he was in Burma, was it? Whoa. He said it. And then some people get quite upset that I can't respond. I said, well, look, just perhaps we could start with his name. Was it actually his name? Date of birth? Anything, anything you do have, get it all down. And the more you know, and what part of the country he lived in, because that might indicate a regiment. Did he mention it? Has he got a badge? Is there a photograph where we can identify the badge? And it becomes quite a fun investigative thing. You can then, especially with Google these days, and a helpful teenager. And then you can go to the regimental museums, which you mentioned. You can, and people like us are much more increasingly archiving it digitally. You can then actually find out what and where, and no matter what they did, everybody's human. Everyone has this image because of films and popular culture and things like that their relative must have been a hero. But yes. Sometimes they weren't. I mean, there's our latest, to digress, our latest newsletter. If you go on our website, you can see it. If you subscribe, we'll just email it to you once a quarter. But David Leakey, another, Black Rod, General David Leakey, lovely, lovely man. Black Rod, he had to work for that shocker Burko. Anyway, but he writes the sort of first paragraph. He said, my father was one of three. The older brother got the posthumous VC. I think his father got 2 DSAs and an MC, or 2 MCs and a DSA, or whatever. And the third brother got court-martialed and was essentially saw himself as a pacifist. Well, how brilliant! And and he wrote about the third one. And it's very well written. But I thoroughly recommend. It's just a joyous sort of tale of this extraordinary man. So. Whoever they were, I mean, it took immense strength. I mean, interestingly, my grandfather, who went to just about all the operations, went to a Quaker school, was quite religious, not a Quaker. But because of that, he was very keen to do his bit, but didn't want to carry a gun. So he joined the medical corps. So he was last out of Dunkirk, one of the first in at Normandy, had been to Alamein. And because he went through the concentration camps in Germany, when they got into the Japanese prison camps and the Far East prison camps, they went, well, about classic minute, about prison camps, off you go. Extraordinary. Yeah. So I mean, these things. Yeah, imagine what he saw. That's that classic army thing, though, isn't it? I remember I had that. You ski, don't you, Cann? I went, yes, I do. And he goes, right, well, you're leading an expedition up Mont Blanc. I go, well, that's climbing. And they go, well, it's mountains.
It's hills, it's snow. What the fuck do you want? Get on with it, boy.
I only do down with lifts, And I went, so I led an expedition up Mont Blanc 3 months later. I mean, how do you work it out? It's so military, isn't it? You swim, don't you? Right. Well, you're going sailing around.
Exactly. You've been in the water before. Excellent. Good.
Doing around
You're in
the
charge
world.
of the river boats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's classic. Absolutely classic.
Mark, I'm conscious we're slightly running out of time. Is there anything that you would like to get over to people that might watch the channel in particular? Is there anything you could plug or anything you would like to say?
I'm very keen that as a result of the hugely popular demand of the success of this podcast, or whatever we call it, to come back, of course. No, the most important thing is to thank you. I've listened to all your Burma, what do you call them, broadcasts or podcasts on YouTube?
The YouTube videos.
Yeah, I've listened, watched, and binged them actually, and I loved it. And anybody who can explain Burma and the environmental, political, social, all the factors that impinged on it as you do, and so well and so clearly and in such an entertaining format, is very much a friend of ours. So thank you for communicating the message in your unique and entertaining way. We are very grateful, as are all the veterans and anyone who would have ever served there. It's in your telling, it's factually accurate. We're very, very grateful for you supporting us in what we're trying to do with our legacy campaign. So I mean that, don't blush, but my Lord, it's an honor, and thank you very much. It helps us enormously. And I suppose the plug, Burma Star Memorial Fund, I think we are the focal point for war in the Far East, and I'm trying to bring people together, especially as VJ Day comes along. I'm trying to stop us not getting lost in the noise of VE Day celebrations and everything else. So if anyone can help or wants to get involved, just for entertainment or interest, subscribe to the newsletter. And you don't have to pay anything, just to get our newsletter and everything else, or come to us if you've got anything or you think you might be able to help. But no, I really am very grateful.
Well, it's very, very sweet of you to say, and I will just quickly point out that if anybody opens up the descriptions for any of the Burma videos, the first link on there is the Burma Star Memorial Fund. So just click on the link and follow it through. So yeah. Well,
thank you. And look, we're here to help. It's just an incredible story that we're trying to work out how we keep alive. We've got these schools programs and so on, and we awards. Vera Lynn's given us a prize that we a legacy that we can do every year and everything else. So her estate. So yeah, we're just trying to make sure it's not so much who went left flanking or right flanking. It's just that spirit. That, as we touched on there, that extraordinary spirit of the 14th Army, that combination of cultures, religions, ethnicities, the terrible equipment, but just their ability to just say, well, this is us. We need to think out of the box. We need to improvise. We need to get a grip of ourselves. We need to be better, and we can do this. And it was a colossal feat. I mean, extraordinary challenge. And it just shows, I think, that there's so many good things, without going too deep into detail, that come out of it that are just very good for the next generation and well worth everybody, being aware of and knowing. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. It's the spirit of Burma and the spirit of the 14th Army that we want to be remembered.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you, Mark. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Just one quick question, if I may. I have a slight challenge. Her Majesty's Revenues and Customs appear to be chasing me for a rather large sum of money. If I need to give a large sum of money to a charity in a hurry, can you help?
Oh yes, I'm very happy. don't forget the gift aid that we could have.
Oh yes, there you go. Brilliant. We'll chat afterwards.
We are completely compliant and uncorruptible, but we know where to buy good whiskey, my lord, as well. Should you do that? Every little helps, large or small. The Burma Star Memorial Fund website is probably the best place to go if you would like to make a donation to us. Or just give us a call, and we will help liberate large sums of money from anybody. And I think we do it in a very nice way. We won't order the cheap wine, but you have to give a substantial amount.
Substantial amount. I should bring a couple of stacks around to the office later on. All right, brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark.
No, but thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words. And we will doubtless talk again in the future.
Well, thank you again.